I recently came across a comment from a DNA test user who discovered they were 95% Mesopotamian. Based on that number, they assumed their ancestors stayed in one place for thousands of years, describing their bloodline as pretty pure. It's easy to look at a monument like the Ziggurat of Ur and see history as a collection of fixed points, places where populations settled down and simply never left. But the historical record suggests a very different reality for the ancient Middle East. Instead of an isolated settlement, this region functioned as one of the most active crossroads in the human story. Mesopotamia was a land bridge connecting Africa, Asia, and Europe. For millennia, it was the primary route for migrating tribes, merchant caravans, and conquering armies moving between continents. To understand what a modern DNA result actually represents, we have to look past the idea of a stationary ancestor. Being from this region means inheriting a record of continuous human movement. This map shows the Fertile Crescent. For early populations searching for water, this green corridor acted as a geographic funnel. The environment left them with few options. The Arabian Desert south and high mountains north squeezed migrating tribes into this narrow path. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were the only reliable water sources for hundreds of miles. They pulled in diverse groups from across the ancient world like a magnet, concentrating them along the riverbanks. As these different groups arrived, the population density increased until the land could no longer support traditional hunting and gathering. To survive, people had to settle down and multiply their food supply through agriculture. These settlements weren't built in isolation. The geography of the river valleys meant that every group was forced into close proximity with new arrivals. The birth of civilization was a direct response to this forced interaction. Cities and laws were the only way to manage the constant collision of different cultures in one place. This timeline shows how Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon rose and fell in quick succession. Each new empire expanded its borders, pulling even more distant populations into a single political system. These empires established trade networks that reached from the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley. By the time the first major cities reached their peak, they were already home to people from across the ancient world. This cuneiform tablet is a record of that complexity. Writing was developed as a tool to manage this influx of diverse people, tracking their trade, their property, and their taxes. The wealth generated by these cities made them a strategic target. The flat plains of Mesopotamia offered no natural defense, turning the region into a highway for invading armies from every direction. Major urban centers like Babylon were built using resources and labor drawn from across this connected world. The Ishtar Gate represents the peak of a society that was anything but isolated. Successive conquerors often used forced deportation to maintain control. They would move entire populations hundreds of miles from their homes, intentionally mixing different ethnic groups to prevent local rebellions. This cycle of arrival, conquest, and relocation meant that Mesopotamian history was shaped by movement. It was a site of perpetual cultural exchange. When these ancient empires drew their borders, they weren't just marking territory, they were trapping different groups into shared spaces, creating rivalries that would last for centuries. These excavations show how dense and layered these settlements were. Over thousands of years, mass displacements created overlapping territorial claims, where multiple cultures could point to the same land as their ancestral home. While modern borders were often drawn much later by colonial powers, they were imposed on a landscape already thick with these layers of conflicting history. Many of the regional tensions we see today involve grievances over homelands and displacements that are deeply rooted in this long history of forced movement. Current conflicts are often the modern echoes of a history defined by the constant mixing and clashing of people in the world's most trafficked corridor. Looking back at that 95% DNA result, the assumption was that a high number meant a lack of movement, but the science tells a different story. To have a Mesopotamian genetic footprint is to be a product of thousands of years of trade, imperial mixing, and global travel. Human history is a record of roaming. Our bloodlines aren't proofs of isolation. They are the living evidence of how much we have moved and mixed over time.